Have you ever wondered what messages your higher self is trying to send you? Do you feel drawn to the idea of leveling up your life, but you are not sure where to begin? And here is a big one. Have you ever sat down to meditate only to end up more frustrated than peaceful? If you are nodding yes, you are absolutely not alone. Today, on Magical Professions, we're diving into the world of the Akashic Records with Stephanie Potter, the voice behind Alcyon Akasha. Stephanie brings modern, down-to-earth advice from spiritual sources, helping people connect with their best selves through love, laughter, and insight. Whether you are seeking clarity, healing, or just some practical tips to quiet that busy mind, Stephanie is here to remind you who you truly are and to share 3 life-changing tools that helped her when meditation just didn't click. Stay with us as we explore how to tap into your deepest wisdom, laugh through the process, and create a more aligned, meaningful life. Oh, welcome, Stephanie. It's a great pleasure to have you on our podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's my great pleasure, honor to have you. And Stephanie, can you share with our listeners where you are joining us from what part of the world? Thank you.
So I am in the United States. More specifically, I'm in the state of Georgia and the city of Atlanta. So coming to you from the South in the United States.
Yes, we are almost neighbors. I'm in Florida in Winter Spring, so it's not so far from us. Oh, wonderful. And Stephanie, as we're looking in this specific podcast at things from more mystical, a more magical or spiritual perspective, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the place where you live, maybe about Atlanta or Georgia in general. What are those mystical, magical, spiritual things that you know about this place where you live?
Atlanta itself is a really I would say diverse city, right? So we've got people from all over the world here, which is typical in a lot of cities. Like, let me not think we're super special. But what I would say is there's also a beautiful, the way the city's built itself, there's a beautiful cross-pollination of both city and like park and green space. And so for those of us that are really tied to the land, that is really nice to have in the middle of a city. You know, you've got parks and there are places where you go down different roads and it looks like you're in the middle of a park. And so I really appreciate that. I do miss that we do not have an ocean. I joke around. I used to say, I really wish Atlanta had a soccer team, an IKEA, and an ocean. I actually got the IKEA and the soccer team, believe it or not, over the last 20 years, but I haven't gotten the ocean. But we're also really close to so many major cities. I can be in other cities in, 1 hour, 2 hours, that sort of thing. We also have the world's busiest airport. And so that allows me to get out and to travel all kinds of places very quickly. And so I find a lot of magic there. I'd also talk about kind of the magic and spiritual community here. It's up and coming. We've got lots of people from every modality you can think of. And so it's really been my pleasure to connect with people because with what I do, a lot of times I refer clients to other people that might help them find more wisdom, truth, or healing. And so being able to have access to that is pretty amazing.
Thank you so much. So what I see, first of all, you even in this huge city, busy city, you have connection to nature through those parks that you are talking about. Then it's also city connection to many other places that you can go. So the city that connects. And it's a vibrant spiritual community, as I can see from what you are saying. Maybe you can tell a little bit more about spiritual community in your place. Maybe there are some events that you can share with our listeners. Maybe somebody who is curious might visit some fairs, some spiritual events. That would be wonderful.
For sure. In Atlanta, we find ourselves with many different spaces that are holding space for practitioners and whatever magic they bring. So it could be anything from Reiki or sound baths, it could be shamanic journeying. We see a little bit of everything here. And so it's really nice. We've got what I would recommend is on Instagram, which I'm not a huge Instagram person, but we have something called Spiritual Atlanta. So basically, anyone in our larger community that's putting on an event, they would put something up there and it will roll by. So you have an idea of what's going on in the city kind of when you get here. We've also got some really great stores that provide the magical elements that you would need, whether it's information, sometimes it's readings, sometimes it's events in itself. There's a beautiful, beautiful store called the Modern Mystic in Pont City Market. And they used to have something called Sunday school. And so traditionally, we know Sunday school is maybe brings you back to say maybe some sort of religion. But here, the religion is spirituality and magic. And so being able to go in every Sunday and find people that are like interested just like you and curious is pretty amazing.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing. And what has been your most favorite event so far?
Oh, it's been a minute since I've been to one, so I need to make sure they're still doing it. I think it was actually, I think I just brought it up. There was a shamanic journeying. So there was someone that was able to come in and talk about true shamanic medicine, making sure that there's no misappropriation, but also really understanding how there is such a beautiful connection for many of us to some of the elements, as well as, at the land and getting out into the world, like getting out into nature. A lot of times when you live in a big city, or sometimes maybe when you just work at home from anywhere in the world, you end up staying inside so much. And so putting your feet like on the land and actually earthing can be so amazing for you. So here I get to do that because there are many parks. I've got one, it's called West Side Park. It's actually where they filmed The Walking Dead, if anybody's familiar with that show. They turned that area into a park and it's got a quarry and everything. And so I go out there.
Yeah.
But particularly this Sunday school was great because they even had like a shamanic drum and we did a quick shamanic journey, which really brought us into kind of the mystical, what we would call under the ground, working with spirit animals and that sort of thing. And it was really cool to really open up your eyes around whatever messages were coming for you from that particular modality.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And as we're speaking about the world that is beyond physical, what does this mean to you? How do you see our world that is more than just physical manifestation of things?
For sure. And I have to imagine somebody's already said it, but magic really exists. And what we call magic is just science that hasn't been explained yet. So I take a look at it and say, if somebody was here from 1927 and they saw us talking on a cell phone or taking pictures, they would say that's magic. And so for me, magic is the possibility of everything. And so for me, when I go in and work, so I work with the Akashic Records, and we work with when you guys get into spirituality, and if you decide that you want to try different practices and exercises, the first thing we introduce is the clairs. And that sounds like a really bratty sister group, but it's not. It's actually what we call clairvoyance, clairsentience, claircognizance. I don't have them all in front of me, but basically the idea is that clair is the French word for basically explaining how you're feeling and getting information. So clairvoyance would mean that I can have clear sight. So I can see something in my head in my third eye, or even potentially around you, like somebody might be able to see auras, or be able to see people that have passed over, that sort of thing. For me, my strongest clairs are claircognizance, which means that I get like a download of information. So something I may not know all of a sudden downloads into my head, but it wasn't my thought. So being able to open the space for that and know what that is when I get it. The other thing I have is clairaudience. And part, I think, maybe comes from listening to so many podcasts previously, but essentially I can hear words. Now it's in my own voice, but they're not my words. And so being able to distinguish that. And then for me, clairsentience is all about feeling. So if I'm getting chills throughout my body or heat, sometimes I can feel where somebody's injured, things like that. And so taking in all of that is kind of how I interpret this magical world around us and how I get information. I do have clairvoyance here and there. It's just not my strongest clair. Sometimes I get a little jealous when people can see something so clearly. But the alternative to that is you might see something, but you don't know exactly what it means. So every gift is beautiful. And what I would also point out is that every single person on this earth has spiritual gifts. It's just whether or not you choose to follow it down. It's kind of like if you and I sat down to play the piano and had never played before, one of us might be a little bit better than the other, but we could both teach ourselves to play. And that's the same thing with spiritual gifts. Now, the funny part about that is you have no idea what your gifts are. And so that's part of the exciting part, but also it takes patience to figure out what those might be.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing this view on the world from mystical, magical point. And my next question is, because you are specialist, or at least you are specializing, yes, in Akashic Records, let's define it. What does it mean? What the Akashic Record is?
For sure. I'm not going to lie, it's a little overwhelming, but let's break it down. So, the Akashic Records are the energetic records of everything that has ever happened, everything and everyone that has energy on our planet and in our universe. And so that is a lot. Like, stick with me here. A lot of people like to vision it like a library. And so, more simply put, I believe in reincarnation. I believe our soul comes down to the earth, to 3D, to the physical, to experience itself, because we are a fractal of God, and we come down to learn more about ourselves as a piece of God. But we come down with kind of an idea of what we want to learn, both how do we want to grow in beautiful ways, and then also what challenges we might face. I would also say we come down here to experience the whole spectrum of emotions, everything from joy to pain and everything in between. And so what we do with souls is, since I believe, and take it for what you like, that we reincarnate, when you go into what you think of the Akashic Records, think about it like a library. And so each of us would have a room in that library, and you could go in and see all these books from all of your past lives. And so I'm able to access that information. Now, I don't visualize it like a library, like some people have that beautiful gift. For me, it's just I get information. And I can tell you a little bit more about that. But for me, the Akashic Records, again, really kind of heady sort of idea. But if you think about that, everything has an energetic presence that can't be destroyed. We know that.
Mm-hmm.
That why wouldn't there be a record of it somewhere in the universe?
Yes, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And of course, I'm very curious, how did your path into this magical realm start? Did you, now looking back, see that you already had some predisposition during your childhood, or it developed later on? Can you share your path to where you are now?
Totally. I think that, and this is hopefully more encouraging for your listeners, I wasn't born with a bunch of like beautiful gifts of all of a sudden talking to dead people or souls or anything like that, but I was born curious. And so I remember being in probably like middle school or late elementary school, and we learned about telekinesis. And I believe there was somebody named Uri Geller that could bend a spoon with his mind. And to me, I thought, oh my God, that was so cool. And I was brought up in a house where we went to the library, we were all readers. And so I started reading about telekinesis and all of remote viewing and anything I could get at that small library in New Jersey. I grew up in New Jersey. And so for then, I was always kind of interested in that sort of thing, as well as how we interact, like with like from a witchy perspective with herbs, and how herbs and that sort of thing can affect your body, which is again maybe very odd as a child. But then when I got out of college, I really started studying metaphysics. So that was before podcasts. So I'm aging myself a bit, but listening to books on tape as I was traveling for work, whether it was John Edwards on being mediumship and things like that. But one of the things I didn't do was any of the exercises. So I would just say, okay, I'm listening or I'm reading the book and it says exercise, and I would flip the page. But around 2018, I got laid off from a job that I had been at for about 5 years, and I had a little bit of severance. And so finally I said, you know what? Maybe I should try to do the work. And that's really where I got started with it. So like I said, to me, it was an interest in it and a curiosity. The other thing I would add for everyone is that I started with astrology, because astrology to me is very scientific. So now I know there's a lot of intuitiveness that comes with it. But with astrology, there's so much to learn, right? About a natal chart and transits, and actually it's quite scientific. And so I thought, you know what? If I don't have any spiritual gifts, like for whatever reason, maybe I can at least teach myself this. And that's really where I started.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And how did this journey transform into the Akashic Records?
Great question. When I said, okay, Stephanie, you've taught yourself different things, but you're going to have to figure out what is the practice for you. It's kind of like when you hear about a movie or a TV show and then it shows up like 7 times in the same 2 weeks. That's kind of how the Akashic Records worked with me. So I'd like to think it maybe sought me out. And so what I ended up hearing about it and listening to podcasts and listening to Akashic Record readers, because it's such a big energetic thing that everybody has a different twist on it, right? And so for me, I thought, okay, this seems a little overwhelming, but how does it help people? Because that's what I really wanted to get to, is really, how do we help people? How do I in some way heal, give somebody some sort of healing or hope or information about their life, but also having a lot of reverence for the work and having a lot of integrity around it, right? I would never want to make a prediction or tell somebody something that is just inherently wrong or is going to change their life in a negative way. And so I found classes. Bryn DePel was the teacher that I worked with. I went through 2 different levels of Akashic Records with her. But one of the beautiful things about her classes is that you have to do the work. So we had practice sessions, we had larger groups, we had, weekly calls and education. But essentially, I don't know that it was a certification. Maybe it was. I don't remember. But the idea is that you weren't going to get by without doing the work. And also, it was enough investment to like make sure that you got everything out of it. And so for me, that's really where I got started with it. And what she does a beautiful thing of explaining is how everybody interprets the information that they get differently. Because the Akashic Records, again, you have to use those clairs. So am I feeling something? Am I getting information? Is someone talking to me? Am I seeing something in my third eye? Am I seeing something in front of me? Whatever that might look. And that was the beginning of my journey right there.
Yes, and you also mentioned that initially you even didn't hope that much that you will have certain gifts, spiritual gifts, spiritual abilities.
Yeah.
Can you share how did you see them develop? And probably it was a new discovery that you were making step by step in yourself. So how did it all
Totally.
go?
So when I first started like getting into the records and doing that work, I was what I felt like pulling down information. So I would sit and open up somebody's record with them. And I wasn't reading for myself either, which is really interesting because a lot of people, the first person they would do a reading for is themselves. But it took me about 2.5 years to do a reading on myself. And I think part of it was that I was afraid my own monkey brain and ego would get in the way. I also didn't read people that I knew, which again, most people would go, they feel more comfortable with people that they know reading. I kind of went the other way. So I don't know whether I made it harder or easier on myself as far as that goes. But essentially, I would read people that I didn't know. And so I would sit and open the records. I do it particularly with a prayer and let that energy come through me. And then I would pull down information. But what was happening, what I figured out was that I was burning my energy. So in order to connect with a higher plane, we have to raise our vibration and they have to sort of lower theirs. And so with the Akashic Records, you got to figure that's a lot of energy right there. And so what I would do is I'd be pulling down information. And so I would get random bits. I'd get something like, okay, you're going to a foreign country and you're going to have this moment that has to do with fruit. And that was like an odd kind of thing. I wasn't getting like full messages, but I was getting different pieces, but I felt like I was pulling it down. About 2 years into my walk with that, I went through another class called Soul Reading Method with Nikki Novo. And in that class with Soul Reading Method, we had to look at energy as well as Akashic Records, as well as reading chakras. We did all kinds of different parts. So it was more of like okay, I'm talking to someone's soul, but I might get information from all these different places. And her program as well was very much like that. We went in, we practiced, we had practice groups, and that was an actual certification, which was beautiful. But one of the things when she taught Akashic Records is she talked about that she would at first do automatic writing. So she would get into her record and then start writing what she was getting. And I was like, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to spend the time to write things down, blah, 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 blah. But I would say about 6 months later, after like finishing the program, I found myself on a little island called Ischia in Italy, where I was at a yoga and meditation retreat. And I had talked to the teacher a little bit, and I said, if there's anybody here that really needs a reading, I would be happy to do that. And so I thought, you know what? I'm here. Let me just see if maybe energetically this might flow a little bit better. If I were to do like a download before I met with the person, and then when I meet with the person, open their records and channel their questions. And don't you know, holy moly, that was so much easier for me. And so for me, the way I work is I have to get your permission to go into your Akashic record. It's not something that I'm just going to go into and have access. You have to actually give me permission as well as your full name. And so what I'll go in before reading is go in and do that download. And there I'm really talking to someone's higher self, their soul. And I'm getting full paragraphs at this point now. And so I'll do that for about a half hour, as long as my little hand can write. We don't write as much these days. So going back to writing out things as I'm channeling is really interesting. But there is something too about actually writing things down instead. There's like an energetic exchange when you're physically writing something as opposed to typing. And so what I'll also have my clients do is before they sit down with me, they will write out their questions. Again, physically write out their questions because it kind of puts that energy out into the universe. And so when I'm able to do the download, 9 times out of 10, I actually pick up and answer many of their questions before I've even seen them. Very, very cool. And so the way that my gifts have changed is that before I was pulling that down, and then now I'm doing that actual download where I'm writing everything out and then channeling when I meet with them. The other thing I would add is that Spirit has brought in kind of the gift of mediumship. By no means am I like what I say a full capacity medium, but I am able to sense if when I'm in a reading with somebody and they have their record open, if someone were to come in, if we're talking about them, I can feel them. And then I can also pull information from their Akashic record, connect it with them. So if I was doing a reading with you and you had somebody that had passed and we were talking about them and they didn't particularly show up, but we wanted to get some information, sometimes I can do that, which again kind of blows my mind and has taken a lot of like practice. And I think my guides in Spirit have been really careful with me to only bring in as much as I can channel at a time. And so that's also a new gift that's really been brought in for me.
That's wonderful. I appreciate you telling all of that because some people might find themselves in a similar situation. And that's a beautiful encouragement that with time and with practice, things might bloom, yes, and develop into something beautiful you even wouldn't expect.
That's exactly it. I mean, I think in this day and age, we're so used to getting something immediately, right? We're able to like say, oh, if I'm reading a PowerPoint, I can buzz through it and I get all the information right there. Or I can Google something, or I can find a video about it, or whatever it might be. But with this, it's something where you're having to get out of your head and into your body a little bit and really trust yourself and spend that time. And so those things were powerful to me. But what I'd also add, which I think is maybe interesting, is that when I was on Ischia, I basically had told not everybody that I was doing readings because I only had a little bit of time and it was still my vacation too, right? But I said, if anybody asks me twice, like if they ask me about it twice, I'm going to give them a reading. And the 2 people that asked me twice were people that really blew my mind and changed my own practice forever. While I was on that island, one was a gentleman who was very conservative Christian. And so I was thinking, oh God, why would he even be interested in me? I kind of judged a book by its cover and I thought this is going to be a really hard reading, but maybe this is coming up for a reason. And in his reading, I really just told him about his life. The information that came through was about his life, his struggles, a little bit about his direction, but it was more of, I think, bringing him peace that something like what I do actually exists and is true. Because he was completely blown away. And he's like, I just was really interested because I want to believe these kind of things are true. But he's like, there's no way you could have known these things about my life. There's no way. And you don't know me from Adam, part of my French, I guess. And so that was really powerful to me because it also told me, one, never judge a book by its cover. You see this man as a conservative Christian and you think he's just going to write you off. And so that taught me a lot. But it also showed me that that kind of reading was more about verifying for him that this magic exists and is true, as opposed to giving him, specific recommendations or that sort of thing. The second reading I did was with a lovely woman. She's from a foreign country, a country where I'd say they're very known to be very brash, very like get to the point, then I tell you exactly what you think. So that alone was a little bit intimidating. And then I later found out that she was a director at the CDC. And so a scientist among all scientists, unbelievable. So I've got, okay, a scientist that could be like very honest and very firm. And I did just an incredible reading for her. And again, I think I prejudged that. And she really came in and was very open to everything that I was doing, unbelievably loving. And while I would never reveal anybody's specific information, one of the things she came in and said, I actually had a dream last night. I brought up her father. Her father came in and she said, I had a dream last night about my dad. And he was telling me specific information that you just told me. And so for me, those two readings just absolutely blew me away because I was scared to death to do those readings. This was 2 years ago, still kind of, I'd say at the beginning of my journey. I don't know, I might still be at the beginning of my journey right now. But what I would say is like, if we think about magic, there was so much magic in both of those experiences and they happened back-to-back days.
Yeah.
And it really changed my life.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that's such a great advice to never judge the book by its cover. I think we are restricting ourselves from so many amazing discoveries by prejudging things and even not going through. I really admire you for actually doing it in spite of this judgment at the beginning. You still went and you did. And you discovered something that you wouldn't even imagine beforehand.
The other thing, too, is it just tells us the story of how we are all one. And guess what? I think everybody wants to believe in magic. If they do or not, great. But like, let's not plug anybody from any sort of background or any specific profession or religion or anything like that. I think magic is for everybody. And so for me, that's so powerful.
Yes. And speaking of magic, if we have this world that is beyond just our physical presence, yes, magical, mystical, spiritual, I believe that there are magical professions. In this world of magical professions, what professions do you think is yours?
Yeah.
How would you name it? And what functions do you think you are performing in this magical world?
Yeah. I struggle because I don't want to put a specific name around what I do because I think sometimes that boxes you in because then you start to think, okay, if I do Reiki and I'm a Reiki master or a Reiki practitioner, that's the only thing I can do. And somehow you kind of you've kind of squared yourself into like, I can only do what Reiki tells me from A to Z, right?
Yes.
And I think because we all have such beautiful gifts that also develop over time, I hesitate. But I think where I ended with was spiritual practitioner, like intuitive and channel, because I channel information from the records. So I look at it that way. I also, mediumship is a form of channeling. But then I also talk about intuitiveness and being intuitive. And that to me is more of a psychic. So like when we look at people and we talk about psychics and mediums, I don't know if anyone's talked about the difference between that here, but really quickly, psychics pick up information, potential things that happen in the future, but they really read energy and kind of what's out there. Mediums really channel information and energy of someone that's passed. So every medium has psychic abilities, but every psychic is not a medium. And I like to say yes. I think everybody has the ability to be a medium, but we kind of look at it. So I'd like to think I have that psychic ability. I don't do a lot of predictions. Sometimes I'll bring something up, but that's not really where I'm here. I'm here more to like help people kind of meet their soul and feel better on track with their life. I definitely do the mediumship, but then I would also add the channeling as well.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing. And I agree with your feeling that if we say something very specific, we can limit ourselves by certain things. And my next question is that just looking at your journey, Most probably, and tell me if I'm wrong, you had moments when you maybe got somewhat discouraged, like we all were waiting for the results to happen right here and right now, and you're questioning why don't I have this yet? So in those moments, what helped you to get through and persevere and keep going to get to the place where you are now?
For sure. I feel like I felt that the last, I like to say, 7 years of my life, both professionally in corporate America. I feel like I felt it personally in my own life of things that have happened. And then also in my magic life, this other profession of working with the Akashic Records. So that is a fantastic question. And so one of the things that I've learned the most is a few things. One, when you get to a place like that, sometimes it means there's a block in you, in your ego, in whatever is happening with spirit. They're not ready to kind of bring something in for you. And so to really just stop and allow yourself to feel your emotions, to let everything out, your frustration, your anger, to let it all come up and work through you. Whether that means that you're able to really sit down and cry, maybe you're throwing shoes across the room, maybe it's the batting cages, but really allowing whatever is working through you at that time to come up and really honor it. And that takes sometimes more than once, right? That's a practice right there. The other thing is really looking back at your walk and looking at the positive things and coming at it from a place of gratitude. So for me, I've had, many layoffs in corporate America, and a majority of them didn't have to do with my actual work. Some of them I even got promoted. But I look at it as I was learning what I needed to learn, and then the universe is like, okay, next job. We're getting you these skills so that one day you can do what I'm doing now full time. And so part of that is really hard, right? I had to start new jobs, start in new industries, new positions, that sort of thing. But when I look at it, and I had a wonderful teacher that helped me remind me of this, is like, think about how much I learned from each of those jobs, skills I gained, the softwares I learned, the people I worked with. And so I would look at that in life too, whether it's relationships with people that you've been through. We tend to think about the bad things that have happened when maybe there's a breakup or you no longer talk to someone. What about all the years of love and all the good things that happened there? So instead of ending it on that ugly period end kind of chapter, maybe we look at all the places where we have gratitude for all of the things that led up to that. Because whatever relationship or whatever's gone into our life, at some point it was probably great, maybe even like better than great. And so for me, it's going back and looking at those things, and they kind of help you move forward. When we talk about spiritual gifts, what I've learned is that spirit really, and source, however you want to call it, spirit guides, angels, they work with you every day, whether you ask it or not. Now, they can work with you more if you actually ask for help. And so that's the other thing I would add is asking for help, ask out loud, whether it's your spirit guides, your loved ones that have passed over, your angels, whatever you believe in. If you ask for help, they're able to come in and actually do more for you. But isn't that such a good, like, I don't know, example of us as humans? Like, oh, we have to ask for help. We don't want to do that. We just want to pound through. We just want everything to come our way. You mean we have to surrender and say that we might actually need some help in this world? And so for me, that would be one thing that I would leave people with as well. The other thing I would say is that when it comes to spiritual gifts, what I've learned so far, take it for what you will, is that they come a little bit at a time. So for some people, yes, they might have something that it's like this incredible spiritual awakening, and all of a sudden they wake up and they can talk to people that have passed, or they're getting in all this information. That definitely exists, right? If you go to my website and you talk about my bio, it kind of says still not bitten by a radioactive spider, but hoping for it, that kind of thing. But what I would say is for the people that are teaching themselves, what's interesting is that spirit will eventually bring in stuff. So like I didn't start with mediumship. And actually that was kind of always my wish, because I had worked with mediums before that made such an impact in my life. And while I've done therapy and things like that, and actually do therapy, There were readings that I got with mediums that were so on, they healed me in a 1 hour reading where I would have been in 3 years of talk therapy about something like that. And so I had always said to any, like anybody, my guides or whoever, man, I would really love to be a medium because it's like something that can impact people so much if done the right way, right? And from the right place. And so eventually that actually came to me and is coming, but it wasn't something that they started with. And so that was something interesting to know too, that sometimes you think, man, I really want to have clairvoyance. I want to be able to see things. But that's not the gift that you got. And you might get it eventually. But I would also tell people, like, if you've got your head wrapped around the way that you think something needs to be, that's going to be a block right there. You have to really be open to the information that's coming to you. And what we've learned is that about 40% of people are clairsentient. And what that means is that they're actually going to feel things in their body, whether they taste something, whether they feel like their hearts, their chest is tightened up, whether they feel very happy, they might even feel like energy, things like that. And so knowing that, and that most people are going to start with kind of clairsentience, that's not the one you think of immediately, right? You think of clairvoyance or you think about hearing something in your ear. And so what I would tell people is that these things come, but every time you start to think that it has to be a certain way
Yeah.
or come in a certain time frame, they're going to make it wait a little bit longer.
Yes, I agree. Expectations, those are the blockers. Because when you expect something, it is just so loud and so strong, so that you don't notice those subtle things that actually start to appear and
Yeah,
to take shape. I think that's what happens.
I would say like an experience I'd love to share with everyone that wasn't so fruitful is the first time that I went into the records. Before I did classes or anything, I read a book by Linda Howe. It's kind of I think it's How to Access the Akashic Records or something like that, but it's kind of the book that everybody really starts with. So even if you don't have the money to take classes, you can read that book. You can even order it used if you need to on Amazon. And she has a pathway prayer to help you get into the records. So I read the book and I did all the things and I sat in the room and nothing happened. And so I was like, wow. And so I did it again and I just didn't feel anything. And it was like a little bit startling because I had heard on podcasts other people saying, oh my God, as soon as I got into my records, I got all these downloads, I got all this information. Some majestic librarian took me to my Akashic record and all these things. And like, I wasn't getting any of that. And so that probably actually really delayed me thinking that I had any spiritual gifts whatsoever because nothing happened. And the truth was things were happening, but I wasn't sitting there understanding that I was going to feel something or that I had to like sit in it and sit in the energy and that it wasn't going to just immediately open up for me.
Yeah.
And so when I was taking these classes, both Soul Reading Method and then with Brenda Poe, there were wonderful people that were able to open it up and just get all this information and see that. And that was great. But the people that had to really work a little bit harder and really feel into it, I was definitely one of those people. I think maybe I might still be one of those people.
Yeah.
But I love it because I have a lot more respect for it because I'm able to go in, take my time, and go in with integrity every single time. The prayer I use talks about integrity and truth and being of the light. And to me, that's really, really powerful. But what I would say to everybody is that you might kind of go in and do it, but really know that think about how you're feeling, what your intention is when you go in, and that if you hear all these stories about people that are like having these incredible awakenings or getting all this information, that is wonderful, but that's not everybody.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And I think probably media, movies, they predetermine how we expect things to happen. That, suddenly it just changes you forever. And I think that it's because of the nature of how films and movies are made. It's exaggerated experiences because they really need to showcase it, that you would understand that, something happened and to show it in a very short period of time.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, but that's the expectation I think that we have through all of the movies and even books that it just comes, baba, and
Yeah.
it's all done and forever. The life is changed forever. And It happens. So I've heard that some people get that really strong spiritual awakening when they're at certain sites that has very strong energy and whatnot, but often it's not healthy for our mental state. That very sudden change, complete change of our beliefs, of how we look at the world and everything, it doesn't end well in quite a few cases. But this approach of just working every day, little by little, and making this change subtle, that's very good. And for our health, we are becoming more stable and achieving our goals.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I really think it starts with intuition, which is something that we can use every day, every single person on this earth.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of that means getting out of our head, which is what we like to do. As humans in general, especially in the United States, we're very logic driven. So we call that kind of sometimes the uber masculine, right? I want to go to my head's going to answer it from my ego and all my facts and my figures and my logistics. But what we really want to move towards is a balance of the divine masculine and the divine feminine. So with feminine, we have intuition, receptivity, creativity, that kind of balance. And so that also means getting into our heart and our body. So one of the things I like to bring up a lot is that one of the places that anxiety can come from for many people is that their head is telling them one thing and their body, their heart, is trying to tell them something else. And energetically, through science, our heart is actually a lot more powerful than our brain. We have the toroidal field, I believe, is like an energy that comes out from our heart. And so there's a lot of like power in our heart and that connection between our heart and our brain. And so I like to tell people like that intuition is sometimes just listening to your body and getting into your body and getting out of your head, because that's why a lot of times we're dissociating, we're on our phones, we're not in our bodies. But when you talk to somebody and you said, oh, you just took a walk around the block and listened to music, how much better do you feel? Or people that get on their Pelotons, it's because they're in their body and not in their head, and they're giving themselves. So what I would say is if you're already doing that, start also listening to your body, right? So if you make a decision or you're wondering about like a decision you should make, see what a yes and a no feels like in your body. And that's one of the things that we teach is that intuition, to start listening to it. Sometimes just to keep my intuition honed, I might get in the car and say, I know I'm going out for food, but I have no idea where. And so I will just kind of listen to my heart and say, do I make a right? Do I make a left? And then I'll always end up somewhere pretty amazing. But it helps to teach you to trust your intuition. And we find that in all parts of our life, whether it's business, whether it's at home with your family, whether it's doing magical things, all of that can be really powerful. So it's something that I would say for most people is the first step as far as working with spiritual gifts.
And what was the most challenging part for you in this spiritual journey? And maybe how did you overcome that challenge?
Ooh, great question. For me, personally, I think it was sticking with one thing, because I'm just curious and I want to learn about everything. So like if you were to look at my bookshelf right here, you'd either think I was super curious or maybe schizophrenic. I'm not sure. But I've got everything from past lives to herbs to galactic information, oracle cards, tarot, astrology, Chinese medicine, you name it, all kinds of different modalities about stuff. So I was super interested. So enough to know probably more than the average person, but by no means a subject matter expert in any of them. And so for me, both choosing, or maybe they chose me, Akashic Records, but also really starting to hone in on my readings and what's going to make me really good to help people the most. Because it's not about me. It's about me becoming the best channel I can. So getting out of the way so that the messages for that particular person come through, and really sticking with it, because I get so excited about things. I tend to really like to start things, but I'm not great at follow through. Yeah. But for me, like this was something that I have now seen like the benefit of it for myself, and more importantly, the people that I work with. And honestly, I'm still kind of a skeptic. So like I was born in New Jersey. I was born with skepticism in my blood. It still hasn't gone away, right? And so I like to think that also makes me good, because I just don't believe everything. And then every time when I do a reading and this information comes through, there's still doubts of sitting here writing pages for someone that I've never met, don't know. and I'm about to go into maybe some really deep things with them. And like, man, what if I'm really off base? And that hasn't happened yet. I always say, take, like with a reading, take what like resonates and leave the rest, but also go back to it because it might resonate later. But going back to your question, for me, the hardest thing was picking one thing and then following through with it because I wanted to offer all these things. And I still do. Like I've done, worked at people's events where I've done, some astrology or taught human design or these different things. But really sticking with Akashic Records and trying to stick with it and become the best channeler I can for the people I work with, that would be the hardest thing for me, but also the most rewarding.
Yes, I absolutely understand you. I'm very curious about things and
Yeah.
my interest range dramatically. So, what helped you to stay true to your course with Akashic Records? How did you manage with all your curiosity and willingness to go, to different sides to achieve your goal of
Yeah.
helping people?
A few things. Working with people, even though I have that Jersey skepticism, I also really, I think, and I don't know what we would call it, maybe justice, I don't know, or integrity, was really born of two parents that were very about honesty, transparency, and just doing the best thing for other people. And so for me, I think that has always been throughout my whole life. And so for me, making sure that like, I never want to say I can do something I can't do or give somebody information like I talked about that's going to hurt them in any way. And like and when I say hurt physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, any of those ways. So having a lot of integrity. And then the prayer that I say that I got through like my teacher, it's kind of something that's handed down.
Yeah.
Again, talks about truth, integrity, grace, peace, and just really being of the light. And so when I get into the records, I sit in those feelings as I'm saying those words so that I have the right intentions to come through and to work with people in a really beautiful way. Because if it starts being about me or like what my gifts are or how much I've like brought through for someone, any of that, then we've got the ego and that's in the head and not in the heart. And so for me, I just want to be really careful about that. I think there are people that have gifts that maybe have not bad intentions, but maybe like get excited and give too much information and it may or may not be right. And so all of us have probably gone to a palm reader or a tarot reader or a medium or a psychic or anything like that where maybe you felt like you got taken advantage of or all of a sudden you had a curse and you had to pay more money and things like that. And so with any profession, there are people that give it a bad name. And so for me, I try to stray the other way. The other thing that's really important to me is privacy. And so if you have a reading with me, I won't even tell anyone you've had a reading with me unless you give me permission. I do that with my friends and my family. So to me, I think I go ultra, I don't know whether it's like HIPAA or whatever we want to call it. But, I might reference something that came up in a reading for someone to give examples, but I would never reference anything in a reading without either getting that person's permission or if it's not a testimonial that's on my website. So for me, that's pretty powerful as well.
Why do people want to have their records read? What does this bring to them?
Yeah, for sure. So I think I maybe specialize in people that are in transitions in their lives, which is kind of broad. Let me be clear. We're kind of always in transitions. But a lot of times people need like that extra voice around things that are happening in their life. And sometimes I tell you information you already know that's been on your heart for 6 months to 2 years. And sometimes I tell you information that you don't know. And so that, again, that's super broad. Let me be clear. But the idea is that it's really going to help you in those transitions of your life. So whether I like to say we sometimes start chapters in our life. So maybe we move somewhere or we start a family or we get married or we start a new job, whatever those transitions look like. But sometimes chapters start for us that we didn't ask for. You lose a job, you get divorced, maybe somebody passes in your life, that kind of thing. And so being able to call on your team and spirit, whatever that looks like for you, whether it's a spirit guide or angels or your family that's passed over, to kind of get that attaboy, right, about what you're doing in your life. But I also think what I do is I bring people a little bit closer to really what their soul called them here to do. So that goes back to, I feel like our soul comes down to earth with an intention. And so sometimes I feel like I'm writing permission slips to help people get a little bit happier, a little bit more healed, a little bit more clarity. And I think I will do that all day long because people come out a little bit more focused and excited about their life, and really just bringing them back to kind of what's going to make them the happiest. That's not my goal. That's just the outcome of what comes through in the information.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
that's powerful, especially in those times of transition. And I think we live during this time right now. So your work, your magical work is very important at the moment. And you also mentioned that when you are bringing this information to people, you are channeling in.
Mhm.
And of course, a lot depends on your state of consciousness.
Yeah.
How clean is the channel for the information to get through? How do you keep your channel clean so that you can produce the best work you can for a client?
Yeah, that's something that I'm always working on. So, for one of the things is 24 hours before a reading, I will not drink alcohol. But what's also come with me is that now when I drink alcohol, if I have one drink, it feels like I've had four. I think it has to do with me opening up spiritually, honestly, because I find it with a lot of other people kind of that have worked on spiritual gifts. So for me, it's that. The other thing is electrolytes. So when I'm channeling, I'm burning electrolytes. I like to think I'm like Tom Brady, like level quarterback, just burning, burning them. And so for me, especially if I'm doing mediumship.
Yeah.
So for mediumship, I burn a lot of electrolytes because usually I'm talking with spirits that are more recently passed than kind of the Akashic records that have always been there. And so it's a little bit more vibration that I've got to bring down. And so I have to do practices if I think mediumship's going to come up before I sit down with somebody and open their records. And so that looks like I could be dancing, anything to get my vibration up. A lot of times I will put on some old school hip hop and I will dance it out before I sit down and work with somebody. The other part of that is meditation. And I know you mentioned that a little bit, and I've got that on my website too, is different ways of finding meditation that works for my brain. Because I think a lot of us have tried to sit down in a quiet room and close our eyes, and it didn't work out so successfully. And so for me, I've been able to find different kinds of meditation based on the way I'm feeling, what I need, and maybe even how much time I have to kind of get my body and my brain clear. The other thing I do is I actually, again, ask for help. So if it's somebody now that I'm reading, so I'd say about 3 years into doing readings, I did start reading people that I knew and loved. And so I ask for extra help and I say an extra prayer or, incantation, whatever you want to call it. But I basically put in a request to say, like, I know I love this person and I know them, but help me take this bias, anything that I have that's coming up for them or through them that is of me and not of the light and of the channel. Mm. And so that is always a work in progress. But I think because I waited so long, I would also say I didn't start channeling for myself until this past September, which is a little bit crazy because I had been doing this work for about 6 years and not really, I think I just had some fear around it, right? It's like, I don't want to be biased around anything that I'm telling myself. And so I had just some different things, transitions happen in my life. And I thought, okay, maybe it's time for me. That's when I was on that Portugal trip that I mentioned earlier to channel for myself. And so I've started doing that. And so that's been really powerful too.
How did your vision of the world, understanding of the world change over these 6 years as you were progressing on your spiritual journey, as you were accessing records, learning in more depths, in more dimensions about people around you?
Yeah, yes, like straight up, yes, in many ways. So for me, learning more about death. So when you talk to somebody, we are all so afraid of death. And in the United States, we don't have a lot of really good rituals to honor someone like you find in other countries. And so like learning that, like I believe like our energy, it doesn't go anywhere. You just talk to somebody on a different plane. And so like my father was my person. He passed in 2017. And he's kind of what we joke about is he's my momager on the other side. Because when he was on this plane, I would not say that he was Mr. Metaphysical. He worked for the state of New Jersey. He was chief of the public defender's office in like Atlantic City and Camden, some really rough areas. And we laugh because I don't know that he knew I was interested in this stuff, but it wasn't like he was going to be like, hey, maybe you should start a side hustle or start a business or, start doing this. But now from the other side, I'm still able to channel him or to bring him in with mediumship and get his information and his help and his love. So for one thing, it definitely changes how you view about people that have passed and death. The other thing I would say is for sure synchronicities. So seeing where my spirit guides are talking to me throughout the day or trying to guide me and being open to that. And so a story that just happened to me the other day is I was actually going back to New Jersey the other week to visit family and friends. And I decided I was going to make this agua fresca. It's like a green drink that had like cucumber and basil and all this stuff. And I bought up the ingredients and then it left for New Jersey. And I was like so bad at myself that I didn't make it because I knew I was going to come back to a bunch of bad ingredients. And weirdly, when I made a stop to get gas and food when I was driving up there, I kind of just got this download from spirit to kind of follow my intuition. And so I did. And I ended up at the spot that actually made agua frescas and the green one that I love. And it was at a particular chain. And that's not one that we even have in Georgia. And so it just kind of showed me that spirits are actually trying to guide you to different things and to help you. You just have to be open to it and seeing those synchronicities in your life and also saying thank you for it. So that seems like a very silly example, but it just shows me about how our team in spirit is consistently trying to contact us and work with us. Mm-hmm. So that for sure has opened me up. The other thing is with the amount of meditation and then working with people that are, sometimes in difficult times and difficult spaces emotionally, I've learned a lot about myself and how I have to deal with my emotions and where meditation helps for me. And then also the importance of my physical body. So getting out and walking or doing exercising and that sort of thing, because being able to balance that, we hold so many emotions inside our body, and then that in turn can make us physically ill. And that's where a lot of our physical illness comes from, is emotions that have been trapped in our body for a long time. And so for me, learning to release them and somewhat be more emotional is another thing that I would think I definitely learned and am learning as we go on.
Yeah, beautiful things. It's a transformation and tuning in and starting seeing those synchronicities. Yeah, so it's all around us and inside us. We're just not paying attention. We're so busy thinking about other things, solving some problems at our job and whatnot, that, we just not notice. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You guys have all had intuition, right? You thought about somebody and then they called, or they sent you a Facebook message, or you saw them on Instagram, or you ran into them at a restaurant and they just happened to pop up. And that's intuition right there. Or you might only have 10 minutes to run in and get something because you've got to be somewhere else. And somehow you get the first or second parking spot. We call it princess parking. Things like that happen. Like, to me, sometimes those are our angels working for us. But sometimes it looks like, maybe you got laid off from a job, but were able to find another job really quickly, or you had to leave maybe somewhere that you were living and you were able to find somebody to sublet your house really quickly. Things like that. It's like the universe working for you. Those are tiny miracles that we see every day.
Yes, absolutely. And to help people to start seeing this, and first of all, to quiet their mind, to start seeing things. What would be your recommendation of doing meditations? Like you said, you discovered that actually it can be flexible. It can be based on the moment, on the state you have right now. It can also depend on the time you have on hands. So it's not necessarily going and sitting in the lotus position, somewhere in the dark, and it can be different. Maybe you can talk about that to our listeners.
For sure. So the first thing I would say is I would point out places where you might already be in meditation every day. And so these are places where your body goes into auto drive, so to speak. So think about when you are doing the dishes, when you're in the shower, when you're driving, right? So your brain state actually changes when you're doing those sort of things. So like, how many people have had like a really good idea in the shower, or something they had completely forgotten that pops up when you're driving and you're listening to music, and then you're kind of all of a sudden, boom, you think of it. Now, it's interesting because these are times that also feel really inopportune to write something down when you're driving, when you're in the shower. Maybe even when you're doing the dishes with gloves on, who knows? But what I would say is pay attention to those times in your life right now where you're doing something so automatically that you're kind of tuned out. What I'm saying is allow yourself to tune out, but really feel what's coming through to you. So that's something that, again, people can kind of enact every day. The next step is meditation. And I know that sometimes that sounds like a swear word to people because they're like, listen, I'm really tired of people telling me to meditate. Really, I can't do it. I tried it once, tried it twice, maybe even tried it 3 times, and it didn't happen for me. And what I would say is a lot of people think it is just closing your eyes and tuning out every single thought and getting to this kind of plane of nothingness. That is wonderful if you are a monk in a Buddhist temple somewhere in Asia. And for the people that can do that, wonderful, but they've worked for hours and days and years to do that. And so what I would say is one of the common things that people don't realize about meditation is like it takes a really long time to get there, but you can still get benefits from meditating. And the idea is allow those things to come up. The way I like to do it is I actually visualize it. So if an idea or something comes up that I need to do or I'm thinking about or whatever, the idea is to give it a place to allow it to come up. So think about it popping on a cloud and floating away or in a balloon and the balloon bursts, because that way it's kind of coming through, you're giving that space. What I'd like to remind people about meditation is we are generally, as humans, like to pray a lot, whether it's asking for something, journaling, actually praying, whatever that looks like. That means we are talking to a source, higher source, whatever you believe in, the universe, God, Jesus, Buddha, whoever that might be. But you know what? We're not really good listeners. And so that means that the universe wants to speak to you back, right? But meditation is that chance to listen in. And so we don't generally, as a culture or society, do a good job of listening. We talk about what we want, but we don't think about listening. And so meditation is that chance to do that. Now, finding the right meditation that works for you, because we all learn and take in information in different ways, different meditations are going to work better for you. Some people like a meditation when they're moving their body. Some people like a meditation where they're actually saying something. Some people like a meditation where they are visualizing a path and somebody's guiding them. Some people just like music without words, sound bowls, things like that. And so not to like hype myself up or hype my website, but on my website right now, I have a 1-pager PDF that talks about like the main different types of meditation and what might work for you. And then I've got for each type 3 different meditations that you can link to. They are not my meditations. I work with Insight Timer, which is a free app. Everything is absolutely free. And it will take you to these meditations to try these different things. So sometimes that looks like sound bowls, Tibetan sound bowls, just listening. Maybe you're walking, maybe you're sitting. Maybe sometimes it looks like affirmations. So just talking your way into being positive. And maybe it's 5 minutes of affirmations while sitting in your car before you go into work. Sometimes it's just cleansing your energy, right? So you've been in a crazy day at work, whether you're at home or in an office, taking 5 minutes to kind of cleanse your energy before you walk in the door or shut that laptop. And so I also am working on a quiz where somebody can answer like 5 or 6 questions. And that will also kind of spit out, here are the top 2 based on your answers that work for you. And then here are some meditations that might work with it. So I would encourage everyone to kind of find what works for you. I think on my website, I talk about, it's like putting on shoes for the day. You think about what am I doing today and what shoes do I need? And I think that meditations like that too is just figuring out throughout the day what it is that you like. And so what you'll find is that you just feel a lot more peaceful, right? You feel that you're able to get information. You can handle the things, the transitions, the challenges that come across daily a little bit better. But as you go on, you will start to get those messages from the universe, from your past loved ones, from spirit, whatever that looks like, wherever you need guidance. So that's kind of the next step.
Yes, I like how you compared it with choosing your outfit or your shoes, yes, for the day. It gives a very different perspective on meditation.
Right.
So it's not something that just set in stone.
Totally.
Although that's also possible. But it also provides this flexibility in tune with your being, with your state, with the situation you're going through, with your current experiences. What do I need right now? And going from that.
Totally.
I love it.
A lot of people, just like we would watch a television show, is the way I kind of would also say is like somebody might have the same 5 shows that they like and they just watch them all the time over and over. Same thing with meditations. You might find 5 meditations that you really, really love. But there are also people that are wanting to try new things all the time. And so finding whether it's a meditation teacher that you like, a type of meditation, a sound, that sort of thing can also be really helpful. I also encourage people to know that there are things that you can do and you can listen to while you're actually working that will help to kind of bring in more meditation, more meditative thoughts into your head and over your body. So if you check it out, there's all kinds of different things that it's not, again, just stopping everything that you're doing. There are ways to bring it into your life because some people are really busy, whether they've chosen to be busy or they actually are. There's ways to bring this and to kind of make it a priority in your life easily.
I love it. I love this approach.
Mm.
And for those of our listeners who are curious about Akashic Chronicles, how they can start? Where is the beginning of the journey?
Yeah, for sure. So for Akashic Records, I like to say, whether if you are a book person, Linda Howe's book is a great intro. If you are a podcast person like I am, if you just search Akashic Records, a whole bunch of different people will come up from, all different kinds of interestingly backgrounds and different podcasts. And so you can kind of hear that too. And then also, if you're interested in a reading, whether it's myself or someone else, again, just a search for it. It is kind of overwhelming, again, when you think about kind of an energetic library of everything that's ever existed. But there's so many practical uses for every day. And so that's something that I would tell people too. But if they're interested, it's really easy to find information. It's just kind of about what I would say is figure out what level you want to learn. If you're somebody that's very quantitative, there are books that get into the quantum physics of the Akashic Records and the Akasha. And then if you are more spiritually driven, and so it's more qualitative about kind of how can I change? How can I use these? How can I learn this? Or just generally know more about it. There'll be people that talk more about it like that. So for me, I'd probably be more on the other side, talking more about it, big spiritual concepts. I haven't brought in any quantum physics into this conversation, but some of it's really interesting. So for me, it's really kind of figuring out where do you fall, maybe on both sides, maybe somewhere in the middle, and then kind of figuring it out from there.
Yes, everybody finds something that
Yeah.
they are in tune with. And from what you said, there is so much information that everyone can find their own path into Akashic Records.
That's exactly it. Yeah, for sure. And anything with spirituality or intuition, everything we've talked about, it really, each person, it doesn't have to be said a certain way. And so when we talked about expectations around spiritual gifts or spiritual practices, what I encourage everyone is it's about whatever you decide is your belief in a higher power or the universe or the earth or whatever it might be. And so it's not prescriptive. It's not one way. This is a choose your own adventure, and it is an adventure.
And I'm very curious. You mentioned that you need to upscale your frequency, and Akashic Records, in a way, a little bit to downscale its frequency so that you would click and you would get on the same frequency for you to start channeling. Yes?
Yeah.
Do you feel that moment when it clicks? How does it feel to you when you know, yes, it's going, it happened? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the first thing I would mention is energetic hygiene. And so that sounds, again, a little bit nutty, but what it basically means is, am I protecting myself and cleaning my energy on the regular? Mm-hmm. And so before I go into the records or start the day to do readings and that sort of thing, I will ground into the earth. I will energetically connect to the cosmos. Mm-hmm. I will cut off any energetic cords that no longer serve me. Mm-hmm. Anything I will put up kind of a protection around me. I will call in protection, those sort of things to just make sure that I'm anchoring myself between here and the cosmos, mm-hmm. but also protecting my physical and spiritual energy. Mm-hmm. So that's something I would absolutely encourage everyone to kind of learn to do if they're looking to do that. Mm-hmm. But the other thing I started to feel is when I connect to the records, I actually feel pressure on my chest, right by my heart. And when I also started connecting, I used to feel it out of my third eye in my head. And it just feels like a little extra pressure. And so when I connect into the records, I can actually feel that extra pressure. Sometimes it's like I've had to tell them to turn it down. So like with the first year I was in the records, I was working with that group. And basically at some points I had to say, like, there's too much pressure in my head, and they'll turn it down. You know what I mean? But you have to ask. So for me, that's how I can kind of feel connected with the records. There are people that can just kind of channel immediately with the right intention and go into it. I'm not there yet, maybe one day, but for me, that's kind of how I feel it. But then there's also the energetic cleanse on the other side. So I was doing a reading with someone, and she was asking me about her hip pain. And she said that she wanted to know if there was anything spiritually behind it. And so I kind of felt into it and like told her like, oh, it's on this side, and gave her some information around it, whether it was spiritual or not. But then, and I did that like maybe 8 o'clock one night. And then I woke up the next day and I was having like the worst hip problem. And I didn't even put two and two together. I must not have like cleaned my energy. I must have went to bed or whatever. And I called her and I said, is your hip issue on this side? And does it feel like this? And she's like, yep. Why? And I'm like, because I'm walking around with it now. And so I had to stop what I was doing, cleanse my energy. Within like 30 minutes to an hour, it went away. But it was a crazy magical reality of like making sure that you're protecting yourself when you're doing work like that, because you're feeling into other people's energy. And that's happened to me before as well, after that as well. So it's something that I consistently have to learn too.
Yes, you would even not think that this can happen, but yes, I understand. And energetic hygiene is very important. Thank you for mentioning that. And one question that often comes to mind in terms of Akashic Records is that it's considered that all information about our past lives is there, yes, and we can access it. The question of why don't we have this memory of our past lives already available to us when we're born? So what is that reason? Is it protecting us from something? And if it is protecting, then why do we want to get an access to it again?
Right.
Through the Akashic Records. What do you think?
Coming out with the big questions here, Melina. What I believe is that because we are a fractal of God, we come down here each incarnation to learn something new, right? So whether it's both gifts that we've brought over from other lives, as well as challenges, as well as new things. So an example would be maybe like a core wound of abandonment. In a past life or past lives, you've experienced abandonment, but haven't been able to kind of learn more about it, feel into it, and work on it. And so maybe that comes forward in this life, but it's something for you to, in this life, you get a do-over, so to speak, to learn more about it and to not bring forward all of the maybe terrible things that have happened to you. And so there are also things that you come down here with to work on that don't come from other past lives. So I think the forgetting allows you to have a clean slate to some degree to come down here and start to work on some of these things. Where I think past lives are important is that sometimes when we're shown a past life or learn information about it, sometimes it will heal something in this present life, because the soul is remembering something that's happened to them that was so impactful that they've kind of brought it into this life with you unknowing. So an example of that is a lot of people that are afraid of heights. A lot of times we would attribute that to something that happened in past life or past lives that was so jarring, usually resulting in death from a place on high, that your soul, it just impacted your soul so much. And so when you've grown up and you're like, I don't know why I have a fear of heights. Sometimes when you're shown a past life or start to understand more about it, you realize sometimes it will resolve, or sometimes just having the understanding about the past life makes it a little bit better. What I would say where things start to go wrong with past lives for some people is that they get too deep into what happened in a past life, who they were in a past life. And really what we're saying is you started over this time and you've incarnated this time to be you, to not be so dependent on who you were or what you had access to in a past life. So I think there are gifts and challenges with it. For me, a lot of times the information will come up with what I call karmic or soul ties. So when I am working with somebody, they'll say, I might get a message around, yes, in this life, they have a very difficult relationship with their mother. And actually, where this comes from is in past lives, they've been sisters that fought for their father's attention. And so in this life, even though they're mother and daughter, right, they have these soul ties, they just always have this kind of thing running unconsciously in the background. And so sometimes realizing that for one party or both parties, they say, oh, that makes so much sense because I could never understand why she would do this specific thing or act this specific way. And so it helps that person moving forward with those relationships in their lives. So I think that's where past lives can be helpful. But also, like I said, also like be caution around how much importance you put on whether it's a name in a past life or who you were, or maybe you were Cleopatra or whatever it might be. But I do think they can be helpful in healing for us and help us understand kind of some of our current trajectory. But it is a little difficult when we call it the great forgetting because you wake up and you're incarnated in this new soul family and you don't know what you've brought forth with you or what you're working on. And that's kind of what we're here to do, is to learn and experience all those things.
Do you have an experience of working with somebody or meeting somebody who had memory without interruptions, or at least with minimal interruptions, who would remember their past experiences, past lives fairly well?
Yeah, so there's someone that I don't know personally, but his name is Matthias DeStefano. And you can find him easily in Gaia TV, on YouTube, on Instagram. And he's a gentleman that supposedly remembers a majority of his past lives. And he's able to bring information forward that's helpful to us. And I know that he travels a lot. The other person I would bring up is a gentleman named Ansley McLeod. I don't know if he knows all of his past lives, but his gift in this life is to be able to talk to people and have access to their past lives without having to channel. I believe he meditates for sure, but he is wonderful. I know he's been on Oprah, a Scotsman that now lives in the US. And he's written some fantastic books about understanding how old your soul is, as well as the different components of past lives. But his gift is to work with people. So maybe they've had like shoulder pain their whole life and nobody can figure out where it came from or what it was. And he's able to like talk to them about a past life where they just like absolutely got their shoulder obliterated, with a cannon or something. And then that person is actually healed because their soul recognizes the trauma and realizes, oh, this is something that happened in a past life. And so his work is unbelievably interesting. And I feel, both Matthias and him have unbelievable integrity with what they do. And that's really what I look for when I'm trying to learn too. And so he is very much known for past life work too.
That's so wonderful to see these people around and appearing on social media so that people would get to know about them, get inspired.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I see, there are more and more people who are interested in spiritual life, in magic, like you mentioned at the beginning, that probably most of the people, they feel something inside, unless we completely block it, but we all have it.
Right.
And we see that there are more and more people like this. What do you think is the reason for that interest, this wave of interest in spirituality and magic?
Well, first, I'd point out that you're talking to somebody named Stephanie Potter, emphasis on the Potter. So when we are kids and we have things like Harry Potter and we're taught all things are possible and magic exists, and we're allowed to like believe that as kids, but somehow as adults it's sectioned out of us for some reason. I think there's something like that. But I also believe that our generations and the ones younger than us are coming in with just more magic and more innate knowledge around making the world a better place, but around spirituality and magic. And they're really opening it up, opening the door for the rest of us to learn more about it and to find it. But I think for each of us, I'd question you yourself of like, when did you stop believing in magic, or when did you limit it only to Harry Potter or some fantasy show that you're watching? Because we watch these things and like, I love The Wheel of Time. I love The Witcher. I love all kinds of Star Trek, Star Wars. I'm super nerd. Stargate is one of my favorite shows ever. And so for me, these are all sci-fi, fantasy, what we would call magic. But I think that there are elements of truth to them. And I think that even the people that created Star Wars were even channeling from things that they've seen in past lives or on other planets. And so I think we see it everywhere. We also see channeling in music and art and all of these things. So people already have these spiritual gifts and they don't even know.
Yeah.
An example I would bring up of myself is that before I kind of got into this work, and still, I used to work with couples to be an officiant and marry them, but I would work with them to create a custom ceremony for them. So I'd meet with them, anywhere from 3 to 6 times before we would do like their actual wedding. And I really loved working with them and creating unique things that was very much a ceremony about them, as opposed to a ceremony about who knows what that officiant's going to say. And what I realized now when I look back on it is I was actually channeling when I was writing their ceremonies. And then I would go up and I would perform their ceremonies because I don't mind public speaking. And it actually really started because same-sex couples, people were saying, oh, I'm not going to marry a same-sex couple. And I said, well, I will. I'm not religious, but I will sure marry you. Absolutely. And what I found is I would go up to do the actual ceremony and I would just say quick prayer, whatever you want to say, and say, Spirit be with me. And then I would go up there and do the whole ceremony and then not remember anything when I was done. I would remember laughing or kind of like a few little things. And I realized that I was both channeling when I was writing and then channeling when I was there. So I think a lot of people, to answer your question, are already having this magic in their lives and they may not know it, whether they're writers or sometimes maybe even coders, just coming up with this incredible code. It doesn't mean that they aren't doing it on their own, but it also means I think they had some magical help.
Yeah.
And so I hope that people will start to see where there's magic already in their life and then lean into it some more. But I also think with some of the current astrology, we'll call it Pluto and Aquarius, we're going to see a lot more of this in our everyday. So whether it's spiritualism, whether it's magic, whether it's, witches and herbs, things like that, I think we're going to see a flow back to that. It doesn't mean that modern medicine absolutely and science isn't going to be important, but I also think we're going to see as a culture and as a community more emphasis on finding ways to treat people and to help people in many different ways, not just from the brain and the ego.
Yes, absolutely. It's multidimensional approach, yes, to things. Yes. Stephanie, if our listeners want to get in touch with you, maybe they want to learn from you and channeling Akashic Records, meditating, just get that inner healing or connecting to themselves, how they can do it?
Yeah, perfect. I'd like to say, if you feel aligned to work with me, whether it's a reading or I'll be doing some webinars about Akashic Records or coaching in the future, absolutely would love to work with you. But I'm also really open into, if you don't feel aligned with me, but you're interested in spirituality, finding someone that works with you. I've been in so many classes and I have a long list of practitioners that I know have integrity and honor and really work from the light. I'm happy to point people in the right direction. It's a lot of what I do. My website name is a whole different story around magic, but I will say it, but I will give you an easier way to find me. So my website is alcyoneakasha.com, but an easier way to find me is through Instagram. My name is Stephanie Nicole Potter on Instagram, and also my legal name, which I'm now thinking may not have been my best idea as far as things go. But it's Stephanie Nicole Potter at Instagram, and my link tree is there. It will take you to my website. On my website, I do have, like I said, that free PDF download. It's a 2-pager or front and back that talks about the different types of meditation and then has links to, at least 21 different individual meditations through the Insight app that are absolutely free. So I'm not trying to make any money. I'm just trying to get people excited about meditation. I've got a quiz that should be up in the next 2 weeks that will, again, you'll answer 5 or 6 questions and then it will spit out, based on your answers, what are the top 2 kinds that might work the best for you, as well as examples. You can book readings there, and then you'll also check out if I've got any webinars there too.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And by the way, what is Alcyone, if we talk about that?
For sure. So when I was creating my business name, I knew I for sure wanted something Akashic, because I really feel like part of my mission currently is to bring a modern spin and just information about the Akashic Records to people. So it's not for me to monetize in any way. It's just for people to understand that these exist and how they may or may not work with them. And Alcyone, I actually said to Spirit, I said, based on the astrology of this day, this is the day that I want to incorporate my LLC. And I could not find any name that I came up with, alchemist, alchemy, anything that felt like very good for me was already taken. And so I said to Spirit, all right, we're going to put this bad boy in your court because I'm tired of trying to figure this out. You bring me a name. And so they brought me the name Alcyone. So it's Alcyone. And I thought, God, I feel like I've seen that before. But I just kind of accepted it. It was a very magical moment. And I went in and I was actually driving to Florida to visit my mom. She was in Fort Myers at the time.
Okay.
And I stopped and I registered my company. I did the LLC. And then later looked it up. And what I found out is that Alcyone is the brightest star in, I believe, the Pleiades. And I think also part of the constellation Taurus, which I'm a Taurus rising in Western astrology. But Alcyone is also one of the planets where they believe there is again, this is going to be super woo, a galactic energetic repository for the Akashic Records. And then Alcyone also has like Greek and Roman mythology around that too, around how she fit in with all of those, but kind of came in very galactically. And so that's really where those two names came from, and really just part of my own magic of like just saying, okay, whatever that means, because if it was looking for a website that people would be able to pull up really quickly, they can go to Stephanie Nicole Potter. That will actually, StephanieNicolePotter.com will bring them back to Alcyone Akasha. But working with the Spirit, they basically said, we really want you to bring this forward. But I'm like, it's not the easiest name to say or read or spell. But that's, I think, part of my walk here.
Yes, yes. Sometimes you might be a little bit kind of surprised by their recommendation, but it is what it is. You know, you need to take it for what it is and just go with it, which you did.
That's exactly it.
Yes.
Yeah, depending, like kind of really looking at Spirit as a team for me. And then also like depending and trusting in them too.
Yes, yes. Stephanie, thank you so much. We covered a lot today. I'm sure our listeners will enjoy this conversation. Is there anything that maybe you wanted to mention and I didn't ask you yet? So it's the best time right now to do it.
Nothing. Okay, that's a lie.
Mhm.
I always have something to say.
Good.
What I would say is, there's so many parts of our life that are regulated, right? That we're having to do every day. And so we don't leave room for magic. And so whether it's spirituality, your religion, combination thereof, look for times and like reevaluate the things that you do every day and find out whether you're still passionate about them. And then also see where you can leave room for magic. Sometimes it's maybe just, like I said, getting in the car and figuring out based on, your intuition, where you're going to go to dinner or where your next vacation is or whatever the next book you're going to read. And so I just say, like, chase those pings, those things that you're already interested in. So if I talked about Akashic Records and you're like, wow, that sounds kind of nuts, I'm excited, let me find out more. Or maybe it's, another modality. Maybe it's some sort of healing modality or shamanic. I talked about shamanic journeying, things like that. I would say, like, this is your permission slip to chase those things down and to remember that, like, there is magic. And a lot of times it's things that are actually scientifically that we're proving now or just haven't proven yet. And so don't write them off and follow that magic.
Thank you. That is a wonderful suggestion. And actually, we have a podcast on shamanic journeys.
Oh, beautiful.
So
call back.
Yes, I recommend our listeners to tune in if they haven't done so. Thank you so much, Stephanie, again. I truly enjoyed the conversation. I wish you all the best. I hope that we will get a chance to meet again because there's so much to discuss. I think on this topic, it's very broad, and I know Akashic Records, there are similar things that are mentioned across different cultures, yes, and accessibility to everyone, really, of that and how it can impact our lives. So there are so many interesting topics and about that and spirituality in general. So I hope to see you on our podcast again in the future, and all the best on your spiritual journey. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being here. I am grateful to now be a part of this community, and I can get as nerdy or as woo as you like. I'm happy to come back.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Loved today Magical Professions tale? Bring it closer by carrying a piece of this magic with you. Visit our Etsy shop, Mythic Facets, where you'll find handmade jewelry and phone accessories inspired by myths, legends, and the symbolic power of natural gemstones. Every purchase not only brings beauty and meaning into your life, it also supports the creation of this podcast, which requires a significant amount of time and dedication from me, its host, Milena. Your support truly means the world to us. So step into our shop, enjoy your treasures, and let mythic facets transform the ordinary into the magical for you. Stay tuned for more stories of wonder.